Tonight, for the first time in more than 50 years, the Assad family's grip on Syria is over. The dictator forced to flee after rebel fighters overthrow the regime.
It's a moment of historic opportunity.
We break down what it means for Syria, the region, and the world. Donald Trump talks tariffs and his dinner with the Prime Minister.
I spoke with Justin Trudeau. In fact, he flew to Mar-a-Lago within about 15 seconds after the call.
And it's the end of the Eras Tour.
This is probably the biggest concert tour that the world has ever seen.
Taylor Swift plays one last show in Vancouver.
From CBC News, this is The National with Ian Hennemanson.
Bashar al-Assad is no longer Syria's dictator. Russia says he's now in exile in Moscow. The regime that rules Syria for decades suddenly swept away. Rebels celebrated on the streets of Damascus, trampling symbols of the regime. They ransacked Assad's home and took over state media while burning buildings linked to the security apparatus. The leader of the rebel coalition hailing this victory as a new chapter for the region. CBC News is following reaction across the region and around the globe. We begin with Margaret Evans, who is in neighboring Lebanon tonight.
This is Syria at the turning of the page, the past in flames and a new hope rising. As news spread that Bashar al-Assad had fled the country, people took to the streets in jubilation. After all the years of dictatorship we've lived through, we were in prison, says this man, and now we're out and at the moment where we're going to build the greatest Syria. That's what this man is promising them. Arriving in Damascus to speak at the Great Mosque, the main rebel leader Abu Muhammad al-Jowlani, an Islamist who marshaled disparate rebel factions to end more than 50 years of brutal dictatorship under the al-Assad family. He called the feat a turning point for the region. He also promised healing for a country soaked in loss. This woman says 13 years of al-Assad's repression has cost her dearly.
My cousin, my son, my family, all of them.
The rebels arriving in Damascus freed some of the prisoners from the Sadnaya prison, as they've done in other cities. Al-Assad's jails, black holes of torture and death into which the regime's opponents often disappeared. Elsewhere in the city, there was looting, some residents finding themselves in the presidential palace, helping themselves to a few souvenirs. The former Prime Minister Mohammed Ghazi al-Jalali, who said he wouldn't leave the capital, has been designated as a transitional figure by the rebels, clearly eager to present themselves as a group with a plan, also aimed at calming regional concerns. Those celebrating the demise of the al-Assad regime weren't confined to Syria. These were the scenes in neighboring Lebanon, the border crammed with Syrians eager to return home after years of exile. Mohammed Sharia hasn't seen his family since fleeing the country 8 years ago. He says all Syrians will now be safe because the one who threatened them is gone.
And Ian, Russian state news agencies are reporting that al-Assad is now in Moscow and has been given asylum.
Margaret, there's still lots of questions about what comes next for Syria. Are people worried?
Some are, of course, but many really are focusing on the need to acknowledge today as a moment the end of a barbaric regime, one that has used barrel bombs on its civilians, chemical weapons, laid whole cities under siege. They really want to feel the importance of what's happened and acknowledge it now.
Margaret Evans in Beirut tonight. Bashar al-Assad's stunning downfall is being felt across the Middle East tonight, both his allies and enemies confronting this new reality in the region. To Syria's east, Iran was a key ally of Assad, helping to prop up his rule for years, which is one reason why, to the south, Israel has been hostile to Assad. But it was Turkey to the north that backed the rebels that toppled his regime and are now in control of most of the country. Tom Perry is in Jerusalem tracking the reaction as Syria's role in the Middle East changes quickly.
While Syrians across the Middle East who were forced from their homes by their country's civil war or fear of a brutal regime celebrated the downfall of Bashar al-Assad, Syria's neighbors were taking stock of a radical shift in the region's political balance.
Millions of Syrians who were forced to leave their homes can return to their land.
Turkey, which backed the opposition to the Assad regime, is urging calm.
The new administration must be established in an orderly manner. The principle of inclusiveness must never be compromised.
Iran's government, a staunch Assad ally, issued a statement calling for the swift end of military conflicts, the prevention of terrorist actions, and the commencement of national dialogue with all sectors of Syrian society. Qatar and Egypt are calling for unity and a preservation of the Syrian state and national institutions, the fear that opposition factions could further splinter the country and plunge it even deeper into chaos. Israel has sent troops into a buffer zone along its border with Syria to monitor, temporarily it says, the situation on the other side. Israel's prime minister, at the same time, taking credit for weakening the Assad regime and hastening its downfall.
This collapse is a direct result of our forceful action against Hezbollah and Iran, Assad's main supporters. It set off a chain reaction of all those who want to free themselves from this tyranny and its oppression.
The Israeli military is continuing its airstrikes in Syria, reportedly targeting arms facilities and ammunition depots, looking to keep the weapons of a now fallen regime from falling into the hands of anyone who might use them against Israel. Tom Perry, CBC News, Jerusalem.
And the ripple effects of Assad's downfall could extend well beyond the Middle East. As Ellen Morrow explains, Europe, the U.S., and Canada are all watching closely to see what happens next.
At Syrian embassies around the world, the rebel forces flag already flies. This groundswell of celebration tinged with trepidation for global leaders.
It's a moment of historic opportunity for the long-suffering people of Syria to build a better future for their proud country. It's also a moment of risk and uncertainty.
A sentiment echoed in European capitals and from Ottawa. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau welcoming the fall of Assad's dictatorship, adding Canada urges order, stability, and respect for human rights.
The main thing right now is just to make sure people are safe and secure. Try to get to a period of stability is really the critical first step.
While rebel leader Abu Muhammad al-Jowlani has rejected ties to extremism, now promising an inclusive future for all Syrians, he and his fighting forces have their roots in al-Qaeda. Splintered factions across Syria and a lingering ISIS presence, all adding to a complicated mix.
Disengagement right now is not an option, because when you have a vacuum, that's when the bad actors come back.
Actors the West fears, like Iran and Russia, both spent billions propping up Assad.
All of that has come to nothing now. They've lost their most important ally in the region. And I think this changes the entire geopolitical landscape for the Middle East.
The West is now considering its next steps. The UN insisting Syria's future must be decided by Syrians themselves.
If the government that emerges from this transition in Syria is in fact more pluralist, more open, more inclusive, I would hope Western governments and the American government would be willing to invest in and support.
But first comes the long-awaited and daunting task for Syrians to chart their own path forward. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada has welcomed tens of thousands of refugees fleeing the Syrian civil war. And so the fall of the Assad regime has touched off celebrations here too. Lisa Shing brings us the hopes that so many now hold for for the future.
A long-awaited celebration for a community that's been through so much.
We are very happy. Free Syria, free Syria, free Syria.
News that Bashar al-Assad's brutal regime has collapsed met with joy.
Finally, the Syrians can get the safety, the dignity, and freedom that they deserve.
Nearly 14 years of unrest and civil war left 500,000 people dead and pushed millions of others to flee. Tens of thousands settled here in Canada, many of them now coming together from Vancouver to Winnipeg to St. John's to start the process of healing from decades of rule under the Assad family.
So there's so much generational trauma. For some of us, it's our parents. For some, it started with our grandparents.
Even though the future is uncertain, there's a lot of hope here about what comes next, especially since almost everyone here has a personal story, a connection to the suffering.
Amir Fatal came here as a refugee 8 years ago and has been watching the news closely.
We are worried about the chaos and who's going to lead the country, but I'm laying on the smart people and the great politicians, the Syrian politicians all around the world.
And for many, mixed with the uncertainty of this moment is a clear idea of what they want to see.
The next one who's coming is going to be one who we choose, one who's going to raise this flag, the green flag for Syria.
That's a country, a civil and mature, a country that contributes to the global economy, a country that is pioneer in many areas.
Hopefully we build our own Syria where it's a home for everyone.
A home many here hope they can see again soon. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
So what's next for Syria? A little later in the show, we'll explore what the future holds for the country and how this weekend's events could tilt the balance of power across the Middle East. Donald Trump is calling for an immediate ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. Trump made the comments online hours after meeting Ukraine's president in Paris. Trump wrote Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukraine would like to make a deal and stop the madness. In response, Zelensky wrote, "A ceasefire without guarantees can be reignited at any moment." A Kremlin spokesperson says Russia is open to talks, but Ukraine refuses to negotiate. In his first network TV interview since the election, Trump is doubling down on his tariff threats. Katie Simpson now with what he said about Canada, the Prime Minister, and their recent dinner together.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's quick visit to Mar-a-Lago. We've heard plenty about it from the Canadian perspective. Now, President-elect Donald Trump is offering his version of how it all came together.
I spoke with Justin Trudeau. In fact, he flew to Mar-a-Lago within about 15 seconds after the call ended.
In this sit-down interview with NBC News, Trump reaffirmed his commitment to tariffs, sharing what he says he told the Prime Minister.
I said you have to close up your borders because they're coming in the northern border too a lot. Not like the southern border, but they're coming in the Canadian border a lot. And drugs are pouring in. Almost as importantly, drugs are pouring in, maybe more importantly.
Adding to Trump's broad list of complaints, he is also criticizing trade deficits, though he exaggerated the numbers, roughly doubling them to make his point.
We're subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year. We're subsidizing Mexico for almost $300 billion. As if we're going to subsidize them, let them become a state.
That becoming a state comment is now a recurring theme. It follows what was interpreted as a joke during the Mar-a-Lago dinner, where Trump said Canada can be the 51st state if tariffs destroy the economy, and after this post on Trump's social media platform. There's nothing to suggest Trump is serious about that, but those who know him say he's dead serious about tariffs.
I think one of the things that people around the world know about Donald Trump is that he will follow through with things like this.
Trump also offered fresh insight into his broader foreign policy plans, warning Ukraine should probably expect less U.S. support while remaining non-committal on NATO.
They're paying their bills, and if I think they're treating us fairly, the answer is absolutely, I'd stay with NATO.
But if not, you would consider the possibility of
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
What's getting the most attention in the U.S. is Trump's promise to pardon January 6th rioters and his desire for revenge against the lawmakers who investigated him.
For what they did, honestly, they should go to jail.
Trump says he's not going to direct authorities to investigate his political opponents. Instead, it'll be up to his new attorney general and FBI director. But they have been very clear about going after Trump's opponents.
Trump generated a lot of headlines in that interview. How are officials in Ottawa interpreting what he said?
I'm told what Trump said matches what he said privately at Mar-a-Lago. According to a senior Canadian government source, the Canadian strategy remains the same. The Canada-U.S. Cabinet Committee meets Monday, and the Prime Minister plans to schedule another call with Canada's premiers to provide them an update this week.
Katie Simpson in Washington. After the NBC interview, Trump flew to Paris for the reopening of Notre-Dame Cathedral. It comes almost 6 years after a devastating fire nearly destroyed it. Vanessa Lee takes us inside for the first Mass.
It's being said Notre-Dame de Paris has been more than restored. It is reborn. Worshippers attended Mass at the beloved cathedral Sunday for the first time since the world watched in horror when it nearly burned down in 2019.
Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit.
For France, the reopening of Notre-Dame is more than a religious milestone. It's a moment of national unity. Ahead of the Mass, world leaders and dignitaries joined French President Emmanuel Macron at the cathedral's official reopening Saturday. They included U.S. President-elect Donald Trump and one of his closest allies, Tesla billionaire Elon Musk, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Prince William, and Quebec Premier François Legault. The day after the fire, Macron vowed to rebuild the cathedral within 5 years, which was met with ridicule. We have rediscovered what great nations can do, achieve the impossible, he says. Everyone who made this weekend's celebration possible received a standing ovation. From firefighters to stonemasons and stained glass artists, thousands worked around the clock, using age-old methods to meticulously return the cathedral, whose first stone was laid in 1163, to its former glory. A nearly billion-dollar effort. We must treasure this lesson of fragility, humility, and will, he says. Parisians longing to hear the bells ring again wanted to witness the historic occasion. The church is a beautiful symbol of life and also a call to live, he says. Notre-Dame is now reopened to the public, a visit that will without a doubt strike a new chord. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Montreal.
Rapper and record executive Jay-Z has been accused in a lawsuit of raping a teenage girl. The civil suit alleges that Jay-Z, along with co-defendant Sean Diddy Combs, raped the plaintiff at a house party in 2000 when she was just 13. Both men say they're fighting the accusations, which have not been proven in court. Police in New York have released new images of the man they believe shot and killed a health insurance executive on a street in Manhattan. One of the images appears to be inside a taxi. The other seems to have been taken from inside a car. On Friday, authorities said they believe the suspect may have left the city. Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, was gunned down outside a hotel Wednesday morning. Police do believe Thompson was the intended target. After about 150 concerts, Taylor Swift's Eras Tour is coming to an end here in Vancouver. The significance of Swift's record-setting run. Plus, are food recalls on the rise?
We do tend to see a couple more outbreaks associated with those imported products.
Why colder months can mean more contamination. And a special trip to see Santa.
Who's excited to go to the North Pole?
We're back in 2. You're looking at a pair of $32.5 million shoes. Dorothy's famous ruby slippers, worn by Judy Garland in The Wizard of Oz, sold at an auction in Texas over the weekend. These shoes were once stolen from a museum and found 13 years later. Heritage Auction says it's the most valuable movie memorabilia ever sold at auction. Music history is being made right here in Vancouver tonight. Taylor Swift is performing the last show of her record-breaking world tour. Yvette Brenton now with the end of the Eras.
The stadium erupted as Taylor Swift took the stage for the final show of her world tour.
We get to spend the last night of the Eras Tour with 60,000 beautiful people in Vancouver.
The big finale drawing thousands of Swifties to Vancouver.
We're all here for one reason, so it's exciting.
Even those who didn't have tickets, like this 9-year-old who just came to enjoy the atmosphere outside.
Amelia's the biggest Swiftie in Soyuz, and this is kind of a Christmas gift for her.
I just think she's really nice because she has really relatable songs.
Swift's multi-generational draw, her book, movie, and smart marketing have helped her smash concert records with her 149 shows in 50 cities.
She is a business. She is a product. There's no question about it.
When I walk in the room, I can still make the whole place shimmer.
The Eras Tour has grossed more than $2 billion in just under 2 years. And there are signs of trickle-down Swiftonomics. Moneris, a payment service provider, reports spending in Toronto spiked 45% in the 10 days around her tour there.
Everywhere she goes, she has a massive economic impact. And it's now to the point where, our Prime Minister commented on her not coming to Canada initially.
Luring Swift north along with so many of her fans.
Well, this is probably the biggest concert tour that's the world has ever seen, and she decided to end it here in Vancouver. I know she has something great in store next, so I can't wait to see what that is.
And that's the big question for all these fans. After almost 2 years touring the world and 3 sold-out concerts right here in Vancouver, what will Taylor Swift's next era be? Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
The fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime is prompting questions about Syria's future. How we got here, why the stakes are high for several nations.
5 foreign countries have a military presence in Syria.
And why what happens next is critical for the region.
There are opportunities here to put the region on a much more stable footing.
The National breaks down the stories shaping our world. Next. Everyone survived, but there were some scary moments in Palm Springs this weekend when a police motorcycle crashed into a group of people. It happened at the annual Festival of Lights parade when the officer was apparently trying to pop a wheelie. 10 people were injured and were helped out by other first responders who were also taking part in the parade. Just this past week alone, 2 big food recalls, cucumbers and kale salad kits, both over salmonella concerns. So we asked Jennifer Yoon whether there are more recalls than usual, and here's what she found out.
Carrots, cucumbers, and sweet kale salad. At some point over the past few weeks, all of these items have been recalled. The fear, risk of contamination from things like salmonella or E. coli. So why does this keep happening?
Sometimes we forget that food comes from farms and food comes from nature.
Food can get contaminated in all kinds of ways while it's being processed like this or in the field in areas close to manure. Recalls tend to ramp up in the winter as we rely on imports.
Food produced in Canada is very safe, but we don't make a lot of cucumbers in December in Canada. So we do have to rely on imported fresh veggies in Canada. And we do tend to see a couple more outbreaks associated with those imported products.
But while it may feel to some like there are more recalls this year, that's just not the case.
There's some more consumer awareness, or they're being shared on social media, where we're not seeing an increase in food recalls right now.
I'm thinking that it's heightened awareness and more rigorous testing.
And some even say more recalls would actually reflect a better detection system.
Because that means that those things are getting caught before they make people sick.
Most of the time in Canada, companies voluntarily recall the food after they conduct their tests. Preventing more outbreaks could involve new decontamination methods, as well as cracking down on delinquent companies.
Some people suggest that litigation, like in the US, they're really strict now. They're actually calling for prosecutions of CEOs. We haven't got that far in Canada.
It's also important to assess your own risk. Be aware that some products have a higher risk of contamination. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Now let's dig deeper into our top story, the ousting of a brutal regime. Crowds revel in the streets of Syria, celebrating the end of President Bashar al-Assad and his family's half-century of iron rule.
Rebel forces have forced Assad to resign his office and flee the country.
It follows a lightning-speed rebel offensive that seized control of the country's capital.
It's simply astonishing. It's mind-boggling. It's hard to process, in fact.
The latest chapter in a civil war which, until a couple of weeks ago, lay seemingly dormant for years. So why did Syria's long-simmering struggle reignite? Chris Brown breaks down how the situation unraveled and the key players fighting for control.
After years of laying dormant, the 13-year civil war in Syria suddenly became dynamic again, with events shifting almost by the hour, and ending with opposition forces overthrowing President Bashar al-Assad in just 11 days. It began with the rapid fall of Aleppo, Syria's second-largest city. Aleppo saw some of the worst fighting of Syria's civil war, which began in 2011. Assad spent 4 years trying to wrestle control of Aleppo from rebel forces, eventually succeeding in 2016 with the help of Russia in what many believe was a turning point in the conflict. But this time, Aleppo fell within hours.
But why has Syria's war reignited now? These are the key players.
Bashar al-Assad's family is Syria's main political dynasty, ruthlessly ruling the country for over 50 years. Assad took over from his father in 2000. 11 years later, he faced a major challenge to his rule from largely peaceful protesters associated with the Arab Spring. His crackdown against them evolved into a full-scale civil war. The opposition groups that recaptured Aleppo, Hama, and in the end Damascus are led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, which controlled nearly all of Idlib province. It was initially an offshoot of al-Qaeda, but lately its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jowlani, has been talking about religious tolerance. He told CNN his goal is to topple Assad and create a government for all Syrians.
5 foreign countries have a military presence in Syria: the United States, Turkey, Iran, Russia, and Israel.
This analyst says it was Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon that upended the situation in Syria.
Hezbollah, the group which supported Assad for many years, had to remove and relocate some of its forces and fighters as well as assets back to Lebanon in order to protect its territories there against an Israeli offensive.
Russia has long supported Assad's regime. It joined the Syrian government forces in fierce airstrikes on Aleppo and other cities, but now appears to have evacuated much of its military force from the country.
Whatever victories Russia was able to achieve in the past, whether those are military victories or symbolic/political victories, those were temporary. Now we are in a different phase when it comes to its ability to project power.
Iran also supported Assad during the civil war and sent in its militias to help fight the rebels. Then there's Turkey, which backs groups of rebels near its border with Syria and wants millions of Syrian refugees inside Turkey to be returned. The United States supports the Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces, who want autonomy within Syria, which Turkey's government opposes.
And finally, there are remnants of the Islamic State in Syria. While badly weakened, it could try to take advantage of the chaos to regroup.
We will also continue to maintain our presence in eastern Syria, which is solely to ensure the enduring defeat of ISIS and has nothing to do with other aspects of this conflict.
Syria's 13-year civil war has already created an immense refugee crisis, upending politics in Europe, even impacting Canada's 2015 election when Justin Trudeau made resettling Syrians one of his main promises.
25,000 more Syrian refugees.
Already, there are worrying signs the humanitarian situation is rapidly deteriorating again, something observers will be watching to see how HTS addresses. Ismail Al-Abdallah is with the humanitarian group, the White Helmets.
The humanitarian situation is very difficult. Even bread was very big problem. The bakeries stopped. Some NGOs that we coordinate with take this responsibility, and now they distributing bread every day in Aleppo City.
A key challenge is that HTS is recognized as a terrorist entity by many countries.
While many Western governments wanted Assad gone, they also don't want to be seen as helping Hayat Tahrir al-Sham.
So they have to find a way in order to provide assistance and help those civilians who live in those areas. The question is, how can you do that? And I think this is what we need to discuss.
After Aleppo, other cities on the highway to Damascus quickly fell to the opposition. And then the capital did as well. More than 300,000 Syrian civilians have been killed since the start of Syria's civil war. Now the country, and whoever ends up leading it, faces the daunting challenge of uniting many opposition groups, each having vastly different agendas.
That search for unity in Syria will be critical. So what will it take to get there?
What we will inevitably see is, power struggles.
Our panel breaks down what rebel forces could do next. A stunning rebel offensive forces Syria's president to flee, ending his family's more than 5 decades of repressive rule.
It is a good thing that Assad is gone, a very good thing for the Syrian people.
The world watches while Syrians celebrate the seismic political shift.
It's a moment of historic opportunity for the long-suffering people of Syria.
So what does Syria's future look like? Let's bring in Nader Hashemi. He's with Georgetown University, and Stephen Heidemann with the Brookings Institution for Middle East Policy. Both have been watching this very closely. And Nader, let's start with how momentous this is. Describe that for us.
What's tough to describe in words, what I'm hearing from my Syrian friends and colleagues is it feels like a dream. No one thought that this could happen so quickly. So it's a huge moment of celebration and optimism about the future, that this 54-year-old, brutal dictatorship was toppled so quickly and so effectively. And so huge emotions now, optimism about the future for what the future might hold, but also a lot of concern as well.
And speaking of emotion and optimism, Stephen, you know people who fled Syria who maybe wondered at one point if they would ever get to go back. Now they're talking about wanting to do exactly that.
That's right. Many of the people that I know who left the country to avoid the repression of the Assad regime, some even decades before the start of the Syrian uprising in 2011, are so excited and just are feeling so much joy at the prospect of being able to return. One friend sent me a picture of her house that she looks forward to returning to, and she said the house is tattered but still standing. And I took that to be a pretty nice metaphor for Syrians as a whole.
Nader, when we talked earlier today on CBC Radio, and we heard this from some callers as well, about the notorious prisons in Syria with their doors now suddenly flung open. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I mean, this is one of the characteristics of the House of Assad, particularly the son. The notorious prison system. There is this, one prison outside of Damascus known as Sednaya prison that was described in a 2017 Amnesty International report as a human slaughterhouse. I just heard reports just about 10-15 minutes ago that while they've freed many of the prisoners that were in that prison, they're still discovering layers upon layers of prison cells that they haven't been able to open yet. And that's just one prison among many. And I'm also hearing reports that people are discovering new prisons that they didn't know exist. So this is, I think both a characteristic of the old regime and the joy and elation of seeing these people reunited with their families, discovering that some who thought were dead are still alive, is part of this momentous moment in Syrian history that we're experiencing.
So, Stephen, certainly we're seeing it in the emotions of people in Syria, and we're hearing it actually from governments around the world. Much to celebrate here with the end of the Assad regime, but at the same time, describe for us what the present looks like. How stable, how fair do you think the present leadership, whatever that leadership's going to turn into, how safe it will be?
Well, sure, there's enormous concern about whether Syria will be stable in the future, and that's understandable. But what's striking, I think, is just how smooth and just how effective the first few days of this transition, well, the first 2 days of this transition have been. We've seen the prime minister of the Assad government remain in place. He told Syrians he would be back in his office this morning. He called on public sector employees to return to their jobs. The coalition that led the offensive against Assad has instituted a curfew to try to tamp down potential violence or chaos following the toppling of the Assad regime. We've seen enormous outreach to sectarian minorities, including the Alawis, including Christians. And we're hearing reports from Christians in Aleppo, for example, that they feel more secure and safer now than they did under the Assad regime. So the initial indications, very early days, but the initial indications are of a surprisingly smooth transition process that's underway. And we have to hope that that continues and that the groups that led the military operation will continue to use good judgment in how they organize this transition on the political side.
And Nader, what do you think? What's the likelihood that good judgment will be used over the next few months?
Well, I think we can hope that there will be good judgment, but, the future of Syria is not going to be judged simply by the good intentions of its key political actors. As anyone who's studied political change or revolutions know, that the highest moment of unity and common purpose and tranquility and inclusiveness is in the lead up to the transition and in the immediate days afterwards. Inevitably, Syrians are going to struggle with what every revolution struggles with, and that is how do you establish a new political order? How inclusive will it be? And there'll be what we will inevitably see is power struggles and competitions for political power that it's uncertain how this is going to play out. But those things are inbuilt in any sort of monumentous political transformation that takes place, including the one in Syria. So I don't think we should have unrealistic expectations. I don't think Syrians are any different than any other people undergoing such a monumental political transformation. They're going to have to struggle with these types of compromises like any other people caught up in such a revolutionary moment.
Let's talk about stability in the region. I'll ask each of you this, starting with Stephen. Are we any steps closer, do you think, to more stability outside of Syria, but in the region of Syria because of what's happened here?
I suspect that across capitals in the broader Middle East, leaders are very involved thinking about what their next step should be, about what the overthrow of the Assad regime means for their interests. This is a period of tremendous uncertainty for regional actors. I think there are some trends that are clear that could potentially lead the region into some period of even greater instability, but could also go in the other direction. One of those has to do with the retreat of Iran and the weakening of Iran's regional influence as a result of the loss of the Assad regime. Another has to do with the difficulties that Hezbollah will now encounter in trying to reconstitute itself, given that Iran can no longer make use of Syria as a transit route to resupply Hezbollah. We have millions of refugees around the region who may well be anxious to return home. And that process, I think, holds out a lot of hope, but I suspect that governments in the region will be worried about managing it in a way that doesn't lead to chaos or instability. So we have a number of factors. We're seeing a really monumental shift in the geopolitics of the region unfold in front of our eyes. And we'll just have to see how that develops. But my sense is that there are opportunities here to put the region on a much more stable footing, and that'll depend on how Arab regimes neighboring Syria respond to the current context.
And Nader, why don't you jump in on that same question about, are we a step closer to more stability in a region that hasn't seen a lot of that recently?
Yeah, it remains to be seen. I share the broad outlines that Stephen has just suggested. There's always spoilers in a moment like this. So I'm very worried about groups like ISIS who want to cause chaos, exploding bombs in key locations to scuttle this transition. I think Arab states are very worried about what they're seeing in Damascus today, because many of these Arab states, had invested heavily in the idea of undermining the credibility of political Islam coming to power in an Arab capital and toppling a dictator, especially through armed rebellion. So many of these Arab states must be very nervous about what they're seeing in Syria today and watching how this unfolds. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but there's going to be huge challenges, largely because Syria has a lot of borders, porous borders, and troublemakers can infiltrate those borders to cause chaos. So something to watch for, but I don't think it's going to be an easy ride, transitioning from, this legacy of 54 years of, one family rule to a better political order.
Can I follow on to that very quickly? I know time is short. What Arab regimes wanted from the Assad regime was the stability that would permit the return of refugees, weakening of Iran's influence in Damascus, and an end to the narcotics smuggling that was a huge source of revenue to the regime. They weren't making much progress with Assad in achieving those aims. I suspect they now see that their possibilities for achieving those aims have increased with the arrival of a new government. And so, yes, Arab regimes invested in the Assad dictatorship, but that doesn't mean that they can't pivot and adapt to new circumstances.
Nader Hashemi and Stephen Heidemann, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming up, a flight like no other, aimed at creating Christmas memories.
We do really give them this experience to think that they're, actually flying to the North Pole.
That trip and Santa's big arrival is next in our moment. This is one of 65 kids boarding a very special flight. Its destination, the North Pole, for a meeting with Santa. Once on the plane, the crew simulated the trip as the guest of honor was brought in to greet the children. And tonight, that special moment for those children is our moment.
Who's excited to go to the North Pole?
We have spent the last 3 months identifying families in the community that have children that are either terminally ill or they have catastrophic medical conditions that we wanted to uplift their holidays. It really is a special day that provides a lot of hope and happiness for these families. We do really give them this experience to think that they're, actually flying to the North Pole. So when they arrive, they get a passport, and we have special security lines that are designated for them.
Our captain is Captain Kringle.
The children are ecstatic. So once the plane lands and we form a line and people are clapping and singing, we have Santa that arrived with Secret Service. And each child gets about 5 or 6 gifts each. So it was just very heartwarming and very heartfelt that we could provide such a great day for these families.
There's so much that is so sweet and thoughtful about that, including the brothers and sisters of the kids who are kind of the focus of each of those trips, just because sometimes those brothers and sisters, according to organizers, feel like they are left out. Thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to the National's YouTube channel. I'm Ian Hannah-Mansing in Vancouver. Good night.